Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we break down, complex research, big policy shifts, and turn them into knowledge you can use right away. Today, we're diving into something pretty personal, something that touches almost every family: physical punishment,
Mhm.
or corporal punishment, versus what effective modern discipline actually looks like for kids.
Right. Our mission today is, well, pretty clear. We're going to unpack these really significant recent policy updates. We're talking about groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, and the World Health Organization. We'll dig into the science, why experts are now pretty much universally saying don't do it, and crucially look at the practical alternatives you can actually use.
Yeah, and we have to start by acknowledging the cultural reality here. This isn't some new debate, right? For a lot of people, this practice feels, well, normal, necessary even. I mean, we've seen survey data, even from just a few years back, like 2015, 2018 maybe, suggesting a big chunk of U.S. adults, maybe 56% up to, 76%, still agree that sometimes, a good hard spanking is necessary. It's really ingrained.
It absolutely is. That cultural inertia is it's powerful. If you look at older generations, support was really high, 70% or more historically. But here's where it gets interesting, that generational shift you mentioned. For parents under 36, that number drops way down. Only about half say they've ever spanked their own kids. So we are seeing a change, yeah, driven by younger parents looking for different approaches.
That is fascinating. It's like the science is slowly, maybe, winning that cultural argument.
Well,
Okay, so let's get specific. When we talk about CP, corporal punishment, what exactly does that mean in these official definitions?
yeah, having a clear definition is super important, especially because, like you said, many parents see it as totally separate from abuse. The AAP defines corporal punishment, or CP, as non-injurious, open-handed hitting with the intention of modifying child behavior.
Hmm.
The key there is intention. It's meant as discipline. But, that line between what's seen as acceptable discipline and actual child abuse, it's incredibly fine. And as we'll discuss, it often kind of disappears when you look at brain development.
And U.S. law sort of reflects that ambiguity, doesn't it? Parental CP is legal everywhere in the states, provided it's ordinary force and doesn't leave a mark or injury. But this growing scientific understanding, it's pushed these major organizations to really change their tune, radically even.
Absolutely. Take the AAP. In 2018, they didn't just tweak things, they fundamentally shifted their position. Back in 98, their report just discouraged CP. 20 years later, they oppose it completely. And they've even added verbal shaming to that condemnation. That's a huge jump from just cautioning against it to outright opposition.
That's a powerful statement from pediatricians.
Oh,
And then if we zoom out, look globally, the language gets even stronger.
it really does.
Right.
In a recent report, I think it was for 2025, the World Health Organization, the WHO, they called corporal punishment a full-on global public health concern. When an organization like the WHO uses language like public health crisis, that signals, a massive scale of impact, their estimate. A staggering 1.2 billion children worldwide are subjected to CP every year.
1.2 billion. Wow. That number it lifts this way beyond a parenting debate in one country. It makes it a global developmental issue.
Exactly. And that's why looking at the legal trends is so telling. This isn't just theory. Somewhere between 62 and 68 countries, I believe, have already banned physical punishment completely. Sweden started it way back in 1979. So it shows this is, an achievable goal, both legally and culturally.
Yet here in the U.S., we seem to be lagging behind. Parental spanking is legal across the board, okay? But the fact that it's still legal in public schools in 19 states, that feels totally disconnected from the science we're about to get into. Even if paddling rates are dropping overall, it still means, over 100,000 students are legally hit in schools each year?
That gap really highlights the cultural lag, doesn't it? We still tend to treat it as, well, a personal choice for parents. Despite this mountain of scientific data showing clear harm to child development, which leads us right into that evidence.
Right. Let's tackle the big defense people often use. The main argument for CP is basically it works. It stops the bad behavior right then and there. The kid might cry, but they comply. So why is that immediate success actually misleading parents about whether it's effective long term?
Because that immediate stop, it's driven by fear, not by understanding or learning. The overwhelming, consistent body of evidence, we're talking meta-analyses covering data from over 160,000 children, it shows that while CP might stop the behavior for a moment, it's profoundly ineffective in the long term. Pretty much all significant findings consistently link spanking to, well, bad outcomes down the road.
Okay, so we're trading potential long-term developmental health for just a quick fix, a moment of quiet. What are those negative long-term outcomes that researchers keep finding? What specifically happens?
Well, they span across different areas. Behaviorally, we see kids who experience repeated CP are more likely to show increased aggression, in preschool, in school. It's linked to more defiance, more conduct problems as adolescents, and quite alarmingly, studies connect it to a higher risk of dating violence when they become teenagers. Later on, higher risks for substance abuse, even violent behavior as adults. Essentially, corporal punishment teaches a child that violence is how you solve problems or handle feeling upset.
Yeah, that's a really stark picture of learned aggression. But the science goes even deeper than just learned behavior, right? What about mental health impacts and maybe even changes to the brain itself? This is where it gets really compelling.
Yeah, the psychological outcomes alone are worrying enough. We see links to depression, anxiety, chronic low self-esteem, even cognitive problems that can last into adulthood. But you're right, the neurological findings, those are perhaps the most, well, shocking for parents who genuinely believe they're just giving a mild correction.
Tell us about toxic stress in this context. How does that fit in?
Okay, so toxic stress. It happens when a child experiences strong, frequent, or prolonged adversity, like repeated physical punishment, without enough adult support to cope. CP has been strongly linked to the physiological signs of this kind of stress, specifically things like chronically high levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. When a child's stress hormones are constantly elevated like that, it can actually change the architecture of their developing brain. It impacts their ability to regulate emotions, to learn.
So toxic stress means there's internal harm happening even if you don't see a bruise or a mark on the outside.
Exactly. And we actually have structural findings that seem to back this up. There was one small, but it gets cited a lot, MRI study. It looked at young adults who had experienced harsh corporal punishment as kids. It reported finding reduced gray matter volume in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain crucial for planning, judgment, self-control, emotional regulation. And this reduction was seen even when they accounted for other kinds of trauma. It was also linked to lower performance IQ scores.
Reduced gray matter volume and lower IQ. Wow. And there was that Harvard study too, wasn't there, that took this even further.
That's right. Researchers at Harvard found that the way the prefrontal cortex reacted to stimuli in children who were spanked, it looked virtually indistinguishable from the brain activity patterns seen in children who had experienced severe abuse. This suggests that for the child's brain processing threat, corporal punishment isn't necessarily a different type of experience than abuse. It's more like a difference in degree. The brain still registers spanking as a form of danger, a threat.
Wow. So for decades, the common wisdom was this clear line. A quick swat is okay, abuse is not. And now neuroscience is basically saying, well, that line might be blurry or maybe non-existent when it comes to how the child's brain actually responds.
It's a really powerful point. And, we also have to emphasize that just switching to non-physical punishment isn't the safe alternative either. The AAP is just as clear in condemning psychologically aggressive stuff, yelling, insulting, humiliating, shaming. They state it has equally deleterious effects on children's self-esteem and their overall brain development. It's also harmful.
Okay, now we absolutely have to get into the really tricky part of this, the conflict parents feel. You hear it all the time. This happened to me, and I turned out okay, or it didn't hurt me. That personal story, that anecdote, it's probably the hardest thing for pediatricians and experts to argue against.
It really is. That narrative, it kind of provides emotional justification for the practice, suggesting resilience. And look, it's true. Many people who were spanked do grow up to be successful, healthy adults. But the evidence we have now strongly suggests that success came despite the spanking, not because of it. The real question for parenting today is, why take the risk? Why potentially contribute to developmental challenges when we know there are proven non-harmful alternatives?
And, to be fair and balanced here, we should bring up the academic critiques of these anti-spanking policies themselves. Some researchers, like Robert Larselaire, for example, argue the AAP's updated stance relies maybe too heavily on correlational evidence, meaning, just because two things happen together doesn't prove one caused the other. They argue the policies sometimes feel more like advocacy than a purely objective summary of all the science.
That's a really important point to include, absolutely. Some older research, especially studies looking at what they called conditional or customary physical punishment used, like very rarely, only in specific situations, immediately after the behavioral burnout. Some of that research suggested the negative outcomes were sometimes minimal or maybe no worse than alternatives like timeouts in terms of effect size, though it's important to note the vast majority, even then, pointed towards negative outcomes.
So given that critique about correlation and complexity, is it fair for these big health organizations to take such a strong, seemingly absolute stance? Should parents worry that this is more about pushing an agenda than just pure science?
It's always valid to question the strength of correlational data on its own. However, when you synthesize everything the critiques and the main body of research, you still arrive at a pretty clear conclusion. While there are debates about causality in specific studies, the overwhelming trend of the evidence, I mean the sheer volume and consistency across thousands of studies involving hundreds of thousands of kids, links CP to negative outcomes. Increased aggression, mental health issues, cognitive impacts, and crucially, even the critics generally admit that no studies, especially long-term ones, have ever found positive developmental benefits from spanking. So the scientific weight overwhelmingly favors stopping the practice because there's documented high risk and, well, no demonstrable reward.
That really reframes it, doesn't it? It's less about proving spanking is definitively bad in every single instance, and more about acknowledging there's zero evidence saying it's necessary or actually helpful for development.
Exactly. We're aiming to optimize child development here, not just, get them to stop hitting their brother for 5 minutes.
Okay, so what does this all mean for parents who are genuinely looking for effective tools? It sounds like it requires a total shift away from thinking about punishment, which is just about stopping behavior now and moving towards discipline.
Yes, and the answer is right there in the word itself. The Latin root of discipline, disciplinare, it means to teach or to train. That's the goal. Teaching a child self-regulation, emotional skills, things that are far more valuable in the long run than just immediate compliance driven by fear.
Okay, let's break down some of those evidence-based positive discipline techniques, the ones the AAP and places like the Mayo Clinic recommend. Maybe starting with the most proactive one. Positive reinforcement.
Right. This is fundamental. Actively look for the behaviors you want to encourage and praise them specifically. Don't just wait for misbehavior, catch them being good. And don't just say, good job. Be specific. Wow, I love how you shared your toy with your sister just now. That was very kind. Specific praise really reinforces that positive action.
Okay, next up, redirection. This sounds like turning a no into a yes, but over here.
Exactly. Instead of just yelling, don't jump on the sofa, which only tells the child what not to do, you redirect that energy. Hey, sofas are for sitting, but you clearly have jumping energy. Let's go jump on these floor pillows or maybe run around outside. You're changing their focus, giving them a positive outlet, turning the don't into a clear, do this instead.
And then they're setting limits. How do parents do that effectively without it just turning into a constant battle of wills?
Limits need three things. They need to be clear, consistent, and age-appropriate. When you set a rule, the consequence for breaking it should be reasonable and, ideally, related to the misbehavior. Like, if they misuse a toy, they lose the privilege of playing with that toy for a bit. But consistency is absolutely key. If the boundary keeps shifting, the child never learns where the line actually is. It creates confusion and, frankly, more testing of limits.
And something we often forget, I think, is role modeling, the silent lesson. If a parent is yelling, losing control, hitting, that teaches something powerful too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It teaches that aggression is the way adults handle frustration or conflict. So parents really need to try and remain calm themselves, even when it's tough. That models emotional regulation. If you want your child to learn self-control, you have to demonstrate it, especially under pressure.
Which leads perfectly into using timeouts correctly. They're not just for the child, are they?
Not at all. A timeout, used well, can be for both the child and the parent. When things get too heated, an adult can say, you know what, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I need to take a quick timeout to calm down, and then we can talk about this in 5 minutes. That models self-awareness and self-control. It shows you take emotions seriously and need strategies to manage them just like you want the child to learn. It shifts the focus from punishment to regulation.
This whole approach, it feels like it's summed up nicely by that no-hit zone concept. What's that about?
The no-hit zone is basically a policy or an environment. It could be in a clinic, a school, or even just declared in your own home or car, where hitting, verbal abuse, or any physical violence is just not acceptable. Between anyone, adult to child, adult to adult. It's about creating physically and emotionally safe spaces everywhere for kids, promoting positive ways to handle conflict, and offering support, not punishment.
So wrapping this deep dive up, it seems really clear. The modern understanding of discipline is shifting decisively away from just getting kids to comply immediately through physical means. It's pivoting towards supporting their long-term developmental health, using what we now know about stress, the brain, and how aggression is learned. The aim is building resilience and skills, not just obedience.
Exactly. And that framework also reminds us that parents are learners too, just like their kids. It encourages choosing methods that help everyone, the child and the parent, grow better at managing conflict, handling frustration, dealing with big emotions. Ultimately, it's about building a stronger, healthier relationship.
So we'll leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to maybe explore on your own. If the real purpose of discipline is truly to teach children self-control and how to resolve conflict appropriately, what unlearning might adults need to do first? About our own ingrained emotional reactions, maybe our own histories, before we can effectively teach those essential skills to our kids.